Hello. Today I had the pleasure of speaking with Colin Beavan, who is the author of two books, which are absolutely amazing. The first one being No Impact Man, and the second one being How to Be Alive. Colin has led businesses and nonprofits, run for Congress, been authorized as a Zen teacher, led efforts in diversity, equity, and inclusion. He's been in major TV and radio shows, been in movies, and had his books translated into 20 different languages. He's also spoke internationally in front of tens of thousands and has had his work supported by over 20 foundations. With so much different life experience, he has been a public thought leader for over 15 years on how to live the good life. I hope that you enjoy this episode and get a ton out of it.
When I was about 30 or something, I just felt lost. I was doing life, but I just didn't understand how you were supposed to make decisions about anything. Like, what job should you do? Who should you date? How do you decide? Like, what's the right way forward in life? And religion didn't help me or whatnot. And then I encountered Zen people, and they were like, yeah, there's no answers, there's only questions, but you should embrace the questions and let yourself not know. And I was like, that makes sense to me. So I stayed, and then I stayed for 30 years. And after 30 years, they decided to make me a teacher.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And so your journey about like questioning like what's the right way to live and how to bring happiness really started from a younger age. And I recall from the book too, I mean, just a little bit about your background growing up. Um, what, because last time we had a conversation, you had asked me the question, basically saying why you breaking the cycle of what's going on in your family or what's going on in your life. And so, can I ask you the same? Why do you think you were the one who started asking all these questions on how to live and how to live right?
Mm. Yeah, I come from a background of a lot of trauma in my family. There was a lot of alcoholism, and also a lot of death. And also I was kind of spiritually inclined from a young kid. And then I descended into my own alcoholism and drug addiction as a teenager, and unusually started abstaining also as a teenager, right? Um, uh, so I went into recovery at that stage a long time ago. And so there was something about my family history and something about my temperament that made me ask big questions already. I was like, not, it just, my family history, the trauma, the death in my family made it clear to me that it didn't matter how successful you were, how much money you had, that it could all be taken away from you at any time. But at the same time, I also had excuse me, I love life. I love being alive. So I also had like this thirst for life. So I was like, you know, I want to be alive and I want to do it, but how do you do it? Because the ways people say you're supposed to do it don't work. People die, people, get unhappy, people become alcoholics and addicted. So there's this kind of both things, like big question, but big, energy towards being engaged in life. But so, how or what or why was constant for me. Um, and and so, when I was at an age, I think, where I had built some material security, the questions kind of then had room to come up. And that's when I kind of started on my spiritual search.
Yeah. And is that around when you were 30 then?
Yeah. Saturn returns, 29. Saturn. You know about Saturn returns?
No, no. Is there a astrology event?
Yeah, so sad. They say Saturn returns every 29 years from your birth, and then again 29 years later when you're 58. And it's a time of like where things get shaken up and we realign. And whether you believe in when you believe in astrology or not, it just so happens that that's the period of time when the questioning really came up. And yeah.
Isn't it interesting how some of those things line up and
Hmm.
it just works? And I appreciate how you were saying that religion kind of failed you, but spirituality was something that you always pondered. I do feel very similar to that. I call myself a recovering Catholic, and it's that's something that I talk to my clients about too. Is when I first start working with them, there's this circle of life tool. It's a wheel, and they assess their life satisfaction in all of these areas. And oftentimes, that spirituality is extremely low. And I have these conversations where I'm saying, hey, spirituality isn't just going to um, church or a place of worship, right? There's a lot of different ways to practice spirituality to have a fulfilled spiritual, faith based belief system. So, my question with this is if you're talking to someone who's struggling with spirituality or they're rating it low on that circle of life wheel,
Mm.
how would you explain spirituality to them in a way that maybe they've never heard it before?
Mm. Yeah, let me take a step back. I mean, I think when you say when I'm talking to someone, I think I just want to offer the context that what I do for a living is life coaching and executive coaching. And that's my way of earning. And on the side of that also, or not on the side, but and I'm a teacher in the Zen tradition. So those kinds of conversations that you're talking about are conversations that I have all the time. People are asking about their lives and how they should live their lives, or how do they finish this project. But a lot of times, like sometimes they'll come and they're like, I just want to get a promotion or something like that. But it will turn out that what stands in between them and their promotion is something about a lack of understanding of themselves or a lack of understanding of their lives, right? That the blocks that they have, you could say, are spiritual or are psychological. But I don't. I I guess I don't necessarily, if someone is, as you say, not spiritual, I don't necessarily jump in and say, are you introspective? Are you spiritual? Let me explain what spirituality is for you. Um, Instead, if we're really present with people and really accepting of people, and we're, really, if we provide them the space, we can help them to see that they already have these big questions for themselves, right? So like say with a client, they'll be like, they need to say something to their boss. Um, and then but they stop themselves. Well, why do you stop? What's stopping you? Well, my boss might do this. And well, you can't know what your boss will do. So what's in you that's stopping you? Oh, I have fear. Oh, where does that fear come from? And a lot of times, um what what um what we'll find out is my clients are living their lives as though they're committed to not feeling fear, right? As opposed to committed to where they want to go in life, or what mission they want to fulfill. Like, it will become clear that their actions and the way they're behaving are not about their mission, but just about avoiding feeling fear, right? Sooner or later will be like, well, what is life actually for? Is that why we're alive, to avoid fear? Like, we just born at 0 and then live to 75 and says on our gravestone, I did a great job avoiding fear, right? Or is there something bigger that you choose to dedicate your life to? um
Uh,
and I'll just say this last thing: when someone does say that there's something bigger that they want to dedicate their life to, then it gives them a reason to tolerate fear, right? Gives them, oh, I feel scared now, but you know what? I have this mission I'm pursuing, so I am going to tolerate feeling scared.
yeah. And what comes up for me, that was beautifully put, by the way, Colin. I
Oh,
loved that.
thanks. Thanks.
And what comes to mind is they then have the courage within themselves to do what needs to be done for them to have that sense of purpose or to have that conversation with their boss. So
That's right.
thank you. That was wonderful. And also, thank you for going over a little bit more about what you do. And so the audience understands a little bit more about the context. I really appreciate that.
Sure.
And to give a little bit more backstory about who you are, what you do, I just wanted to start by saying that your two books are in my top three favorite books of all time that I've ever read. And so, anyone who's listening, please, please, please go to a library or buy his books. I will have all of your information. But I wanted to start with talking about No Impact Man. That was your first book that you wrote. There's a documentary on it, and there's been a lot of motion from there. We'll just say that to the least. And so I would love for you to talk about what is No Impact Man and what sparked your desire to start it.
Mm. Yeah. Excuse me. I think it's important to take a little step back from No Impact Man to explain about the journey of my life. So sometimes people, when you're a coach, it's sometimes hard to talk about what you do. What do you do? I'm a coach. Then the people, there's sometimes people don't know how to engage with that. So sometimes I joke, what do you do? I say, oh, I'm a professional quitter. And you say, well, what does that mean? I said, well, I can't tolerate things that make me unhappy. So if they make me unhappy, I quit. And they'd be like, well, how do you make a living doing that? I say, oh, I help other people quit too. And then people laugh. And then sometimes they run away because they secretly want to quit what they're doing, but don't feel they can. Or sometimes people take me in a corner and discuss it. So I did a lot of quitting in my 20s and 30s until without boring you with the details of what I did in my career, I ended up being a writer, and I wrote 2 history books. And when it was time to think of my third book to write, I was discombobulated by the feeling that I wasn't really contributing to the world. Like, I was writing books and people were reading them and it was fine and it was successful in a certain way, but there were big problems in the world, like, climate change and social injustice and things like that. It's just like, again, it's this feeling of wanting to, I said it earlier, like, I want to engage in life. It's this feeling of wanting to engage in a conversation about, like, well, what do we do? How do we live? Like, if I'm happy, but you're not happy, is that worthwhile? Like, can I be truly happy if you're not happy? It's like joking around, you can't joke around. It's no fun joking around if no one else is laughing. It's maybe no fun living if no one else is living. So I had this kind of thing in my mind. So I thought, and yet I was a writer. So I thought, how can I turn my writing career over to service in some way? And what was troubling me at that particular time was climate change. And so I was like, well, how can I tell a story that will actually help engage people in a discussion about climate change? So I came up with this idea, which came to be called No Impact Man, which was me and my family, my co-parent, we were married then, and my daughter, who was 1.5 years, and my dog, Frankie, living in Manhattan as environmentally as possible. And when I say as environmentally as possible, I don't mean like we're careful about our mileage and recycled. I mean, we really tried to eliminate our environmental impact. So if it had packaging, we didn't buy it. We didn't buy anything new. Even food in packaging, we didn't buy. We didn't travel anywhere because of the carbon emissions. Like, we really actually experimented with this life. Well, what was interesting is that not buying, not purchasing, not using resources caused us to use our time and for other things, which meant actually connection, right? So we found that, we had no TV. Without TV, we would invite people over and we would do things like play charades. There were ways in which this project was seemed as though it was about deprivation, but with a lot of the material things out of the way, it unmasked a path towards happiness that is more fulfilling for people, right? Even whether you believe in consuming or not, it doesn't matter. It unmasked It unmasked service as a way of fulfillment, connection as a way of fulfillment. So No Impact Man became this kind of the theme in this book is like, where are we wrecking the planet in ways that make us happy or not? And if we're not, is it possible that we can find a way of life that doesn't wreck the planet as much and makes us happier, right? And that's kind of what leads to, in the end, that leads to what I do now, right? Because it's this big existential question: what does it take to feel as though your life has meaning and purpose, and that you're not becoming happy at the cost of everybody else? These are questions that most people have, and they were begged in this project, No Impact Man, that I did.
Seriously, you did a great job of making it such an engaging resource on how people can take the next step. And so I just want to give a little round of applause to you and your dedication with that, even though it was what, over a decade ago now?
2009 it came out, so yeah.
And I see this book as almost that precursor to How to Be Alive, because it sounds like you wrote No Impact Man, and the desire that sparked that was you wanted to start writing in a purposeful way that gives you meaning, that gets people to ask these questions to hopefully start living better lives. And through your lived experience with, not having a fridge plugged in, right? Literally taking the electricity box out of the wherever it was. My words for that are, but I mean, you guys really went to the extreme, and from that, the more questions popped up. So I kind of relate this to when you're 30 and like there's only questions, there's really no actual answers. And so the questions that you formed and absolutely laid out brilliantly in the book, I see it as a precursor to the How to Be Alive. Do you agree that in order to get to where you were at doing this challenge, that year-long challenge was required or like necessary to have you ask better questions about what it really takes for us to be happy and healthy humans?
So How to Be Alive, just to say, is the book that I wrote after No Impact Man. Is called How to Be Alive: A Guide to the Kind of Happiness That Helps the World. So it's implicit in the subtitle is like, it's about how do we, how do we live our own lives, and how do we be happy, but also how do we choose making ourselves happy in ways that help our communities and our families and the planet that we live on, and whatnot. And so in answer to your question, No Impact Man was kind of like a retreat from the standard ways of life. Somehow it hit a cultural nerve because it got so much press coverage. And actually, I ended up traveling around the world speaking about that project for years. But the overwhelming question that people wanted to know is, well, what about me? How do I live my life? How do I make a contribution in the world? What's that? Like all those questions that I talked about that I had, when I was approaching my Zen practice, kind of all those questions were being repeated by people around me. Excuse me. So that resulted in me writing the book How to Be Alive, which was, and the other thing is that people originally were, what do I do? And then they wanted instructions, right? But instructions, I think that following instructions is what's gotten our world into the problem, like not being awake. We need to be awake to ourselves. Like when we're awake to ourselves, we're awake to our compassion and our love and our desire and our lust and all of it. But when we're awake to ourselves, we're awake to all of it, and we can live in a way that balances it all, right? When we're following instructions, we put all that aside and just follow the instructions. So I didn't want to give people instructions. So How to Be Alive is basically a book about that, like asking yourself the question, like, what's your place in the world? Like, here's a way to help you find your own place in the world and find your own way of living, not following instructions from me, but discovering who you are. and what would make how you manifest in the world correctly, which balances what I said, the love, the compassion, but also the lust and the passions.
Yeah. And you kind of start the book by saying, like, this isn't a self-help book. This is you bring in the life quester aspect of it, which I'll have you explain in a little bit here. And with that being said, you do a really great job of being unbiased with these questions, because it sounds like you really believe that everyone is bio individual, and what works for one person isn't going to necessarily work for the next. So why would you create this systematic, this is what to do, if that might not make the other person happy? So would you mind sharing a little bit about what a life quester is and how you bring it up in the book?
Yeah. Yeah. I just want to say, I say in the beginning of the book, it's not a self-help book, it's an each other help book.
That's
Right.
what it is. Oh,
Yeah. So when I did No Impact Man, and in the years that I spent traveling around talking about it afterwards, I met so many people who were already, had already and for a long time been asking the kind of questions that I ask in No Impact Man. What's important? What do I really need? What don't I need? What's my passion? How do I find my way forward in life? All this kind of thing. And so many people who had already broken away from what I call the standard way of life, and the standard way of life, what I say in How to Be Alive is that the standard way of life has failed. Like, it used to be, the idea was you go to school, then you go to college, then you get married, then you buy a house, you have kids, you just keep your job going, you work. By paying your taxes, you contribute to society. Eventually you retire, you go on cruises and all of that. And by doing all of that, you'll be, happy. You'll achieve the American dream. But actually, those things have started to fall apart. You pay your taxes, but the world still doesn't seem in balance. You go to college, but you still can't find a job, or even if you do have a job, you're spending all your time paying off your college debt. So this kind of standard way of life stopped working. And so these people in the world were looking for other ways of living that I found, and I called those people life questers, people that were questing after a way of life that truly made them happy and truly helped them. And so in some ways, How to Be Alive is a book about how to be a life quester.
yeah, I love that. And I call, ever since I've heard you coin that term, I refer to my health coaching clients as health questers, because it's the
Mm.
same thing, right? They're looking for a way of eating that is going to help fuel their body for whatever they want to do with their life. And I love how you say, you really can't just create like a one size fits all, even though that's what people want. They want to know exactly what to do, to follow the rules, because that's what they've been taught from that standard life approach of going to school from kindergarten or preschool onward, and listen here, this is what you're supposed to do. And that seems to take that creativity and, I would say, resourcefulness out of us, because then we're always relying on the rules. But if the rules don't make sense to follow, or they're not necessarily bringing you happiness, that's when it's time to question the rules. So that's really what I got a lot of, like, question those standard life approaches. Are they making you happy? And if they're not, that's, like you said earlier, like, what in you, what fear, or where does that fear come from that stops you from making that action?
Mm-hmm.
And with my health quester clients, what happens is they realize how easy it is to eat healthy, real foods, and how it can transform their body, their mental health, physical, emotional health. And they get to a point where maybe they realize they're not happy in a relationship or their career, or they're just ready to get involved in their community and get into something that helps people. And what I see is that people are excited that they can make changes in their life. They're like, I just did that. how empowering is that I am able to bring health back into my lifestyle and make it feel super easy because it's very aligned with what feels good for them. But then sometimes they get stuck on, okay, well, what is next? What is the next step for me to bring more purpose and meaning to my life and to help others? And this kind of translate into people that would be really great to work with you. You know, if someone has questioned one area of their life, say their health, and they're looking to bring more purpose, more meaning, and they're just stuck and they come across you, how do you help them find what is the next step for them?
Mm. Yeah. So I don't think there isn't even one size fits all for that. Like sometimes people say, so what's your program or what's your practice? And in my work, I always say, they say, what's your program? I go, you're my program. You, you, you are my program. I am really good at asking questions, but you're the expert on your life, right? So it really depends on the person. But having said that, one way where people can understand what's meaningful and purposeful from them, they say that for them, they say that the research shows we're very bad at predicting what will make us happy in the future, but we're good at knowing what has made us happy. So, an exercise I sometimes ask people to do is to scan back over their lives and ask themselves, where were you really happy? Where were you feeling you were contributing? It doesn't mean you have to be like have solved world hunger. It just means that you were in flow, you lost yourself to yourself, and you felt as though you were doing something meaningful and purposeful that helped someone else. And so usually there's many data points that people can find in their past lives. That's a start, that's a beginning to look at your past and ask yourself who you are. A lot of times too, people actually do know, not always, but sometimes people do know what they want to do, but they won't allow themselves to do it. Oh, I can't make money that way. Oh, my it will shake up my relationships. Oh, so then what comes is it's not necessarily that a person shouldn't earn money or that a person shouldn't choose to leave their relationships in a stable place. Those are fine choices, but bringing into consciousness those tensions, to help people understand, like, oh, I'm scared of this or I'm scared of that. When you bring those things into consciousness, then they can find ways of navigating them, as opposed to just avoiding the journey in the first place.
So it sounds like reflecting on past experiences that you felt really happy in, that you were doing meaningful work, you were in your flow, and
Mhm.
then also addressing the emotions that are holding you back and seeing where they come from.
If you can find them, that's why sometimes, I heard something not too long ago that I really liked. Like there's always been this argument about where does the mind reside? Does it reside in our brain, or is it in the whole body? Is it in the muscles? Is it in the, people these days talk a lot about the vagus nerve. So does it reside in your gut biome and in your stomach? Like, where is the mind? But I heard something recently, which is that the mind doesn't necessarily reside in an individual. Like you and I, there's a mind between us, right? So we can make our minds bigger by asking for help. Like sometimes, so my point is that when you said that, you can recognize or find the emotions that are holding you back or blocking you, sometimes that's really hard to do by yourself. It's like, that old thing about, like, the one fish says to the other fish, how's the water? And the fish says, what water? You don't, we're swimming in our emotional life so much we don't even realize that we're blocked. So being in, another thing is being in relation. One thing that I say in How to Be Alive is that if you want to move forward in your life, is find other people who are moving forward in the ways that attract you. Like, become part of a community of people that are moving forward in those ways. That's another way of making your mind bigger than just your own, like what's in your body. Yeah.
That's a really great recommendation. I like that. And what you're saying, it sounds like, is sometimes we have our blinders on, and the, let's just say, issue could be so apparent to someone like you, a coach
Mm.
who is trained to ask these questions, and you can very easily see what the problem is. And so having that conversation helps take the blinders off for the person who's feeling stuck.
Mhm. Or helps. Sometimes it's not even about the conversation or about someone like me knows how to. It's about being in the type of a relation, being in a relationship with a person who knows how to make it safe for you, and then your own quiet voices within the context of that relationship can be heard.
Yeah, I love that. That's a really great piece of advice. And I know another piece of advice that I really enjoyed from the How to Be Alive book is the like projecting yourself into visualizing different futures
Mm.
and different outcomes. And I notice a lot of people, sometimes I do this exercise with my clients, but even myself, I notice that I can get stuck when doing a visualization practice. Do you have any advice on why that is, or how people can start using visualization, or maybe just what is the best practice of, if there is a best practice of visualization to help you figure out the type of person that you want to become, and how you want to live life?
Mm. Um, you, you can try to project yourself into certain situations, right? And then watch, like, project yourself, if you have ideas of things you might like to do, you can project yourselves into certain situation, and then watch your mind and watch the story that unfolds, and ask yourself, what do you like about that story as it unfolds, what do you not like about that story as it unfolds. Some people, it's hard to visualize in those ways. Another thing to do is, if you imagine that you want to move forward in a certain direction, is to interview people who are already there. Like, if you imagine there's a job that you want, then talk to them really frankly, like, what do you like about it? What don't you like about it? And also talk to them about what you imagine to be. So the truth, like, sometimes, for example, you sometimes people imagine in certain service or helping professions that they will just be in there or helping people all the time. But if you actually talk to the people that are working there, it's true that they do spend a lot of their, say, a therapist, they do spend a lot of their time talking to clients, but they also spend a lot of time maybe wrangling with insurance companies and doing a lot of admin. So actually getting a reality check on places where you want to go.
Yeah, humanize it a little bit so the difficulty of visualizing is less daunting. It's kind of
Yeah.
what I
Yeah,
like
it's
that.
an alternative to visualizing is, talking to people that are already in the place where you might want to
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you, Colin.
go.
Is there anything else that you would like to share about your journey, your coaching, um, anything that would be helpful to the audience before we go into more of a Colin lifestyle, just learning a little bit more behind the scenes of how you live your life?
No, just to say, except for to say, like, if you have questions about your life and you have questions about how you want to live, then let yourself sit in the questions. Like, feel free to pursue them, and be gentle with yourself too. Doing things that are different than what your family did or what your friends do or something, that's, there are real reasons to be a little bit anxious about that kind of thing, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't examine the idea. It means examine, but be gentle with yourself.
It takes time, patience. Patience is a virtue.
Mhm.
Cool. Well, if you don't mind, I've got a few questions to just understand a little bit more about you, how you live your life. Of course, your way works best for you, may not be best for everyone, but I know that it'll be a little bit insightful to know a little bit more behind the scenes. So, with being, I keep thinking Zen master because that's kind of what you resemble for me. But what's the correct title here?
So my Zen tradition is Korean. So there are kind of two levels of teachers. Zen master is the top level, and then there's something that we call Jito Popsanin, that translates as respected teacher who shows the way. The way means like Tao, like Taoism. So respected teacher that shows the Tao. In Japanese Zen traditions, they have the equivalent is Roshi and Sansei. So I'm kind of the equivalent of what the Japanese would call a Sansei.
Okay, that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
So, what are your favorite ways to ground and center yourself?
Oh, what's the issue that I'm grounding or centering myself from?
Yep. Let's say, especially I can imagine through all of your journey since, the 2008, 2009. And to say you're traveling frequently, you're constantly talking to people. There's just a lot of energy in your life, and you may be starting to feel a little stressed out.
Hmm.
What would you do in that situation to help center and ground yourself?
Really depends on the person, but um uh uh one is to recognize one's limits. Like for me to recognize how much I can travel, how much time I can give to other people, versus how much time I can spend alone. Actually, to recognize that, the gas tank can become empty. If you can't keep spending, sooner or later you have to recharge. So um um to there's lots of centering techniques that uh, I use from my Zen tradition. I mean, obviously one is meditation, just straight, but sometimes for some people meditation is too much to handle. It's hard. So sometimes there are physical practices you can go, like even sometimes with clients, I'll just say, they can't meditate, right? But so what I'll ask them to do is I just ask them to they put their hands on their laps, right? And then on the in breath, they bring their hands up like this. And then on the out breath, bring the hand down, right? It is a kind of meditation, but it's a physical meditation. They find it easier to stay with the movement and the breathing than if they are just sitting there quietly. So that can help to ground and center, to come back to this moment, to move away from thinking and thoughts and the stories that we're telling ourselves. Yeah, just
That's
like
a
that.
beautiful practice. I've never heard of that before.
Mm.
Cool. As of right now, what does your morning routine look like?
Well, if it's what I want it to be, um, um, I get up, I do a physical practice from my Zen tradition, which is called bowing, which means bowing all the way down to the ground. It's getting back up again. So we have a practice of that. Then sitting meditation. Sorry. Then chanting meditation, then sitting meditation. Um, then maybe walk the dog. Then sometimes there'll be a recovery movement meeting of some kind that I go to either on Zoom or in person. Maybe I'll do some reading or some writing. Um, uh, and then eventually I'll start working around 10, hopefully.
Well, that all sounds really grounding. Got
That
all the meditation there.
Yeah, that's all grounding.
Cool. So, food, I believe you're vegetarian. Are you still vegetarian?
Yes, I'm vegetarian.
What's your favorite meal to have?
You mean like favorite healthy meal or favorite just
We'll start with healthy, and then I'm going to ask the non-healthy indulgence afterwards.
I make a mean salad and I I call it kitchen sink salad. Like I chop up a lot of vegetables, and put it in, and then I add, for protein, I put in tofu and beans. So that's a good healthy, that would be a good healthy, um, yeah. Sometimes scrambled eggs and some sauteed spinach, something like that. Yeah.
I love it. And to paint a picture of this mean salad, what kind of veggies are you throwing in there?
Let's see. Um, I like arugula a lot. Then I'll throw in, so usually red onions, carrots, cucumbers, red or orange peppers, um, maybe broccoli, raw broccoli. Oh, then maybe some feta cheese, um, then some beans of some kind, and then some smoked tofu or something like that.
That sounds really good. What kind of dressing or do you use a dressing with it?
Um, if I'm making a dressing myself, then I usually do something like olive oil, balsamic vinegar, salt and pepper, and curry powder.
Oh, the curry powder.
Mm,
That is different.
yeah, I like
Where
it.
did you pick that up from?
I think I made it up.
That doesn't surprise me.
Mhm.
A little context for the listeners. Um, in No Impact Man, you talked about like walking to the farmer's market because, right, like least amount of emissions, you got to be walking. And then I think it was a 250-mile radius that you capped off for where you got your food from.
Mhm.
And so most of it from the farmer's market. And so I love how you call it the kitchen sink salad because I can assume that when you make it, you're kind of figuring out like what do I have and just making it work from there. So
Mhm.
I love that you have your ideal what veggies you put into it, but realistically, it's what do I need to use up probably.
Yeah, but also remember that I don't, people say, "Do you still live like no impact man?" Sometimes they say, "And these days I'm medium impact man." So I'm not living the same lifestyle as I did during no impact man. Yeah.
Oh, no, totally understandable. That was extreme. It was. All right. Now, on the other hand, what is your favorite indulgent food, health benefits aside?
Yeah. Just what comes to mind at the moment is pasta. I love pasta, but I don't really eat it anymore because the glucose spike is my body is, yeah, my body's starting to become insulin resistant, and like I can't, it's tricky when you're a vegetarian because it's easy to eat a lot of refined carbohydrates as a
Yeah.
vegetarian. Like pasta is a go-to, and eventually your body starts saying no to that stuff. My body is. So
Mm.
pasta would be nice. Pizza, I like pizza.
Yep.
um but again, I'm staying a little bit away from the refined flours.
Yeah. About 50% of my clients have a carbohydrate sensitivity that we see through genetic testing. And
Mhm.
so it's awesome that you're able to be in tune with your body and knowing what feels good and what doesn't. So,
Yeah. There's also blood tests, meaning,
yes.
my body really feels the same no matter what I eat. Like it doesn't, like I know some people are very sensitive to what they eat. And certainly if I have a cup of coffee and a piece of sugar at the same time, I can feel the difference. But my body doesn't, my body's a little bit like a Mack truck when it comes to what I put in it. It just keeps going, except you know the health indicators, the blood tests show differently.
So it sounds like you've done some glucose tracking.
you know I've been, do you know Peter Attia's book that came out? um
Do you know what it's called by chance? I don't, his name doesn't ring a bell right off the bat.
I can tell you, hang on. His book is called, it's basically a book about it's basically a book about, I'm trying to find the
You're good. Take your time.
okay, it's basically a book about not just living long, but living well as you get older. Um, and um, uh, and so he talks about in preventatively making sure that you don't get plaque buildup in your artery, like not treating plaque buildup, but making sure that you don't get it in the first place. So preventively doing these kind of stuff. So I did blood tests to check on my cholesterol and my blood sugar and all of that. And, you know, um, uh, I don't have any of the plaque buildup and stuff, but I want to keep it that way. So part of it is,
Preventative, very
yes,
preventative.
that's right.
Well, cool. I definitely would love to learn more about him if you can send me that book recommendation if you
I
find
will.
it.
Yeah. Yes, I totally will.
And quick question for you. Have
Out,
you,
the book's called Outlive. Outlive the science and art of longevity. Outlive.
I've heard of that before. I'm sure I follow him somewhere.
Yeah.
Uh, but I'll definitely look into that. And what I have been thinking about is how similar your life philosophy is to the blue zones. Have you studied the blue zones? Do you know what the blue zones are?
I know what the blues are. I wouldn't say that I've studied them, but I know what they are. Yeah.
And so just a quick explanation. So there's five blue zones, and these areas are living the longest and healthiest lifespans. And that's what made me think of bringing this up is you're saying that this Peter guy is writing about longevity
Mhm.
and what are the things you should be paying attention to make sure that you have the most healthy years and functional years so we can live fun and happy lives. And I just see so many connections between what your book talks about and these five areas that are living to, sorry, blue zones are the longest, healthiest lifespans. They're producing the most number of centenarians, so people who are living to 100. And the things that it comes back to is okay, eating local plant-based foods, being involved in your community, having a great social life. That's something that from, I mean, both of your books, you talk a lot about, I mean, what's life if you can't share it with people who are also having fun and are happy. And then, you know, moving naturally, right? When you were going to your farmer's market for all of your food, or when you were traveling, it was all by bike or walking or taking the stairs, not taking the elevator. So you were moving naturally. And then the purpose and faith part that also comes up. You talk a ton about that. And I'm blinking on what's the other thing. There's a lot of other similarities that all of these blue zones have in common, but I really see an alignment there. And so what I'm trying to say is your research and what you found from everything that you've done with your work really comes back to, hey, this stuff works because in these areas of the world where people are living 100 years old and they're healthy and happy, they're doing all the things that you're talking about.
Mhm.
And so it's just another um, validation to you're doing great work and we need your voice in more areas. So I'm so grateful to have talked to you today.
Thanks, Jenna. That's very kind. Thanks. I'm grateful to have talked to you too.
Thank you. And my last question is there an action step that you would like the listeners to take from today? Anything that could help get your news, your word out there, or anything in general?
People should feel free to go to my website. It's colinbevan.com. Yeah, that's a good place to start.
Well, yeah, sign up for his newsletter. He puts lots of words of wisdom out there. It's a good one.
Yeah, sign up for my newsletter. Yeah, you can do that at the website.
Cool. Well, thank you again for your time and your wisdom. It was wonderful to unlock a little bit more of what's going on inside your brain.
Thanks, Jenna. Thanks.